Hello and welcome to NTD News. I'm Kevin Hogan. Let's first take a look at some of our top stories. Today, President Biden meeting with NATO leaders, and what can we expect for his upcoming talks with Russia's president? Leaders at the G7 summit taking aim at Beijing. They plan to take on its debt trap diplomacy, and they're condemning it over its human rights abuses and are demanding an investigation into the origin of the virus. A county in Nevada joins a movement to defend the Constitution. The county says it will protect citizens' rights even if it means defying state and federal law. A federal judge throws out a lawsuit from over 100 hospital employees who don't want to get a COVID vaccine. The hospital is threatening to fire any worker who refuses the shot. NATO member nations say they want reassurance from the U.S. NTD's Jessica Beatty has more on Biden's likely response and his thoughts on U.S. relations with Russia.
NATO members want to know if they can count on the United States, the group's most powerful member. Last week, President Biden signaled his support ahead of Monday's NATO summit.
The overwhelming mutual need for NATO is as much as it's ever been.
Biden, like former President Trump, wants European allies to pay more for their own security. Despite that, he's diverted most of Trump's border wall funding to overseas military construction, many of them in NATO member countries.
So I think Biden will be doing a reassurance exercise, particularly when it comes to reaffirming the American commitment to NATO's collective defense.
Former NATO official Jamie Shea says although China's the biggest long-term challenge, Russia's the biggest short-term challenge.
Russia is going to still be, I think, the #1 security issue that the Allies have to deal with. It's the short term, it's the immediate challenge. In conventional terms, in nuclear terms, in terms of the cyber attacks, the disinformation campaigns.
The White House says NATO will launch ambitious security initiatives. Reuters reports it'll likely include China's military rise as a challenge for the first time. And President Biden said Sunday he agrees with Russian President Vladimir Putin that relations are at a low point ahead of their Wednesday meeting.
I think he's right, it's a low point, and it depends on how he responds to acting consistent with international norms, which in many cases he has not.
Biden said the United States doesn't want a conflict with Russia, and the two nations can try to reach agreements on certain key issues.
Where we can work together, we may be able to do that in terms of some strategic doctrine.
The White House said Biden will bring up the recent ransomware cyber attacks. Putin said Sunday that cybersecurity is one of the most important issues today.
If we agree to extradite criminals, then of course Russia will do that. We will do that. But only if the other side, in this case the United States, agrees to do the same.
Putin says there are some areas of mutual interest, like strategic stability, regional conflicts, and concern for the environment. Biden will meet Putin on Wednesday in Geneva. Jessica Beatty, NTD News.
Washington is assessing a reported leak at China's Taishan nuclear power plant. A report says the Biden administration does not believe the situation is at crisis level yet. A French power group said it was informed of a buildup of gases at its nuclear power station in China. CNN says unnamed U.S. officials have determined the situation in Guangdong, China, is not a safety threat to employees or the public. The U.S. government has spent the past week monitoring the situation, but the French unit that designed the plant's reactor warned of an imminent radiological threat. It also accused China's safety authority of raising the acceptable limits for radiation detection to avoid having the plant shut down. G7 leaders have pledged to provide a democratic alternative to China's Belt and Road Initiative. The summit also called for a transparent investigation into the origins of COVID-19, and they're demanding that Beijing provide access to its labs. Here's more.
Leaders of the world's 7 richest democracies on Sunday agreed to counter Beijing's growing influence in developing countries. China's Belt and Road Initiative has left many poor nations with heavy debt, and now those advanced economies are pledging to provide a democratic alternative. To this point, Biden claimed, against abundant evidence to the contrary, that China by itself is not a main contender to the U.S.
I think we're in a contest, not with China per se, but a contest with autocratic governments around the world, as to whether or not democracies can compete with them in the rapidly changing 21st century.
This democratic alternative addresses the infrastructure gap in those poor countries, which the pandemic has only made worse. The new initiative is called Build Back Better World, or B3W. It will help finance bridges, ports, roads, and other infrastructure in developing countries. Also on Sunday, the G7 leaders called out the Chinese regime for its human rights abuses. Those include the arbitrary detention of over 1 million Uyghur Muslims in Xinjiang, and the regime's failure to live up to its promise to preserve the autonomy of Hong Kong. The world has pushed back against Beijing's aggression, and more so recently. Biden pledged to rally U.S. allies to confront the CCP's economic abuses and human rights violations. Biden also demanded that Beijing allow access to its labs so the world can investigate the origins of the pandemic. And that includes the possibility that the virus was the result of an experiment gone awry.
We have to build a system whereby we can know when we see another lack of transparency might produce another pandemic. We have to have access. The world has to have access.
Biden said the world needs to have access, and the G7 called for a timely and transparent study into the origins of COVID. It would be based on science, and the WHO, which the leaders want to strengthen despite its parroting CCP propaganda in the early stages of the pandemic, would convene the Phase 2 study.
And one of the things that we agreed to do was to strengthen the World Health Organization and to make sure that their inspectors can have powers similar to those used by the OPCW or the IAEA or other inspectors who can, weapons inspectors.
What's more, the U.S. and U.K. signed an Atlantic Charter that focuses on Red China. The charter will see the allies cooperate against the expansion of socialism with Chinese characteristics. That's as Beijing continues to challenge the international liberal democratic rules-based order.
The Group of 7 nations says it'll give 1 billion COVID vaccinations to poorer countries. Britain's Prime Minister Boris Johnson made the announcement Sunday.
British Prime Minister Boris Johnson said on Sunday that the G7 nations have pledged to provide 1 billion COVID-19 vaccinations to help boost vaccination campaigns in poorer countries. During a news conference following the conclusion of the summit in England's Cornwall, Johnson said the pledge was in response to a request by him.
A week ago, I asked my fellow leaders to help in preparing and providing the doses we need to vaccinate the whole world by the end of 2022. I'm very pleased to announce that this weekend, leaders have pledged over 1 billion doses, either directly or through funding to COVAX. That includes 100 million from the UK to the world's poorest countries, which is another big step towards vaccinating the world.
Experts say Sunday's pledge does not represent entirely new resources, and the donation is far short of the 5 billion to 6 billion shots needed by poorer nations. The plan also doesn't address distribution gaps that could make it difficult to deliver doses. Stephen Morrison, the director of the Global Health Policy Centre at the Centre for Strategic and International Studies, however, called the move a very significant step.
A federal judge in Texas rules that a hospital can fire employees who refuse a CCP virus vaccination. Employees of the hospital say they aren't done fighting against the mandate.
A federal judge in Texas dismissed a lawsuit filed by over 100 employees of Houston Methodist Hospital. They sued to keep their jobs in the face of the hospital's threat to fire employees who refuse to get vaccinated against the CCP virus. In his ruling, U.S. District Judge Lynn Hughes says firing the employees for refusing a vaccine does not meet the definition of wrongful termination of Texas or federal law. The Federal Equal Employment Opportunity Commission says that businesses can allow some employees to forgo vaccinations for health and religious concerns. The hospital has granted some employees these exemptions. Jennifer Bridges is the lead plaintiff in the case. She says they expected the judge to rule against them at this level.
But it's really only the beginning. We are going to be appealing this and taking this up. And ultimately, I very well feel this case is going to go up to the Supreme Court. So we're just starting things out at this moment.
Bridges tells the Epoch Times that hospital workers have seen a lot of patients with bad reactions to the vaccines. She says most of the employees in the suit already had COVID. so they don't want to risk their lives or their futures to get a vaccine for something they may already be immune to. The lawsuit claims that employees are being forced to decide between their jobs and taking an experimental vaccine. The plaintiff's lawyer tells the Epoch Times that they plan to appeal the judge's ruling.
Biotech company Novavax reports data showing its protein-based vaccine is more than 90% effective against the CCP virus, which causes COVID-19, across a variety of variants. The company says it's on track to file for emergency authorization later in the year. That's after a study of nearly 30,000 volunteers in the United States and Mexico. Novavax's vaccine candidate was more than 93% effective against predominant variants of the virus. Protein-based vaccines are a conventional approach that uses purified pieces of the virus to spur an immune response. Other vaccines, like those against whooping cough and shingles, also use this approach. Novavax plans to send its vaccine to developing countries since the U.S. has enough doses from other companies. A rural Nevada county passed a resolution declaring that it will defend citizens against unconstitutional acts by federal or state authorities. The declaration springs from a movement to protect Americans' constitutional freedoms from slipping away. Elko County, Nevada passed a resolution to uphold the Constitution and defy any laws, orders, or policies that go against constitutional freedoms. The resolutions declare a list of abuses that will not be tolerated, including violations of citizens' rights to worship and bear arms. County Commissioner Rex Steninger proposed the resolution in the county. He tells the Epoch Times that we are slipping quickly from the republic of our founding into a dictatorship. He says that the swamp is controlling the federal government and Americans are losing their freedoms. Steninger cites the executive orders given during the pandemic as an example of unconstitutional rule. The declarations come from a movement started by retired Sheriff Richard Mack. Mack is known for opposing gun control laws that required law enforcement to run and pay for background checks. He took the case to the Supreme Court and won. Mack now leads the Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association. He tells the Epoch Times, the people of these counties and their elected officials have had it up to here with unconstitutional dictates and mandates. He says that elected officials and law enforcement need to protect the freedoms given to Americans by the Constitution. Mack says this is the peaceful and effective solution millions of Americans have been praying for to take back America county by county and state by state. Mack says Elko County is just the beginning. Multiple sources tell the Epoch Times that other counties are seriously considering joining the movement. The Biden administration has dismantled another Trump-era immigration program. This one assisted victims of crimes committed by illegal immigrants. U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, announced the decision to close the program. Stephen Miller was a key architect of Trump's immigration policies. He calls the decision to close the program a moral stain on the conscience of the nation. ICE says they are replacing the program with a service that helps immigrants who are crime victims to apply for visas or report abuses while in ICE detention. DHS Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas says victims should have access to services regardless of their immigration status. Miller compares the new program to the DEA setting up a hotline to assist drug dealers. Casting aside speculation, Florida Governor Ron Desantis says he had no discussions about being Donald Trump's running mate in a potential 2024 presidential bid.
Have you had serious discussions with President Trump about partnering with him for 2024 and a run?
No, and I haven't had any discussions with anybody about anything beyond what we're doing now.
DeSantis has risen to national prominence for his policies targeting critical race theory, lockdowns, and vaccine passports. Many suspect he could run for president in 2024 or join Trump if he decides to run again. But DeSantis chose to downplay the speculation and put the focus back on his own state, though the governor has been on a fundraising campaign with GOP donors across several states. And during several interviews in recent months, Trump said he would consider the Florida governor as a running mate if he runs for president again. Coming up, the recall election for California Governor Gavin Newsom approaches. A former official who worked with Newsom looks at factors affecting his chances. And aerospace company Blue Origin successfully auctions off a seat on its upcoming spaceflight. The winning passenger will sit next to billionaire Jeff Bezos aboard the New Shepard spacecraft during its first ever sightseeing flight. That and more here on NTD News.
Every once in a while, something comes along so masterful, it leaves you in awe. So inspiring, it changes your life. So beautiful, you wish it would never end. When that happens, it's something not to be missed. Shen Yun, coming to the Palace Theater, June 26th and 27th. Tickets at shenyun.com/Stamford.
If you're like most of us, you're probably getting fed up with the nonsense that's going on in the banking system. Did you know that top U.S. banks have recently amended their depositor terms and conditions to include the words bank failure and what's required of you in 24 hours if, or should I say when, it happens? Don't get blindsided by your bank. Call GSI Exchange today to pick up your complimentary copy of the Bank Failure Survival Guide at 866-424-2382. We'll also send you the required format to file with your bank within 24 hours of their failure, which is now required by the top banks to avoid freezing of your funds. Yes, the top banks can now freeze your money. The world is in a strange place, and banks are constantly changing the rules. So stay on top of the current events that really matter by calling GSI Exchange and requesting your free guide at 866-424-2382.
Hello, I'm Mike Lindell, inventor of MyPillow. Thanks to your support, you've helped make MyPillow become one of the fastest growing companies in America. I'm interrupting this commercial right now. Retailers have canceled MyPillow, and to thank you for your support, I'm going to pass the savings directly on to you. Go to MyPillow.com right now to get deep discounts on all MyPillow products. For example, you can get my premium MyPillows regularly $69.98, now just $29.98, the lowest price ever.
The recall is on for California's efforts to remove its governor. Now the question is, will he survive the recall? NTD's Eileen Ng here's some analysis from a former member of the Board of Supervisors.
The deadline to withdraw signatures to recall Governor Gavin Newsom was on June 8th. The total number of signatures remaining still qualify for a recall election. Officials weigh in on the possibility of an early election and the chances of Newsom being removed from office. Tony Hall, former supervisor for San Francisco's District 7, who worked with Newsom when he was mayor of San Francisco, believes the governor can survive this recall if he held the election earlier.
I'm sure he's trying to do everything he can to move the recall forward, because most recent polls show that if it was held today, he has a good chance of surviving.
Various polls show different recall results, averaging around 39% for the recall and 48% against the recall. Hall says Newsom's spending efforts have kept his approval rating for now, but will cause Californians to pay much more down the line.
So $600 stimulus checks, prizes to take the vaccine shot, promising to build thousands and thousands of units for housing, for low-income housing, for the homeless, not mentioning that all those units are then going to come off the tax rolls. Californians are going to pay for that triple.
He says Newsom's chances will get worse as time goes on.
Newsom's biggest fear is that another Democrat might get in the race who's got some kind of name recognition. If that happens, that 10-point difference between 50-plus votes to remove him, that's erased. And then it becomes the second half of the ballot. Who do they choose? In this blue state, they'll probably choose a Democrat.
Californians are upset with the way the governor is handling the spike in crimes, rampant homelessness, high taxes, wildfires, unemployment fraud, and more. Regardless of the outcome, Hall believes it's an opportunity for people to remove someone they don't approve of or isn't qualified. Hall says he would take his chance with someone new because he thinks there would be a 50% chance things will get better than now. Eileen Ng, NTD News, California.
A seat on a spaceship ride with billionaire Jeff Bezos sold for $28 million over the weekend. The live auction sale concluded a month-long bidding process for the sightseeing trip ahead of aerospace company Blue Origin's maiden voyage next month.
I have $7 million right here. Look at 7-1. Now,
just how much would you pay for a space ride with the world's richest man?
$7 million, now is the time.
7 minutes into a live auction on Saturday, one bidder won that privilege for $28 million.
And that is sold $28 million to number 107.
That concluded a month-long bidding process for a sightseeing trip on rocket company Blue Origin's maiden voyage along with founder Jeff Bezos. The identity of the winner was not immediately disclosed.
It's about 10 times higher in altitude than your normal commercial jet flights.
The sale illustrates a potential market for private commercial space travel. In the month leading up to Saturday's live auction, Blue Origin said more than 6,000 people from at least 140 countries submitted bids. Investment banking company UBS estimates a $3 billion annual space tourism market by 2030. That's with optimism that space travel will become mainstream as technology is proven and costs fall. The prospect is fueling a race among tech giants to be the first to travel beyond Earth's atmosphere. Bezos is competing against the likes of fellow billionaires Elon Musk's SpaceX and Richard Branson's Virgin Galactic, though one source familiar with the matter says Branson just might steal Bezos' thunder. That source says Branson could possibly be on a test flight to the edge of space over the July 4th weekend. Bezos and Saturday's winner are not expected to take off from West Texas until July 20.
Coming up, a French baker living in Germany specializes in all kinds of festive pastries and breads, perfect for fans of Europe's Euro 2021 Championship soccer tournament. A French baker in Germany is celebrating the start of this year's European Soccer Championships. He's making baked goods that represent the tournament matches.
Frenchman Ludovic Gerbois has been baking in Germany for over 15 years. And even though he's injecting a little sweetness into the tournament for fans from all countries, he's aiming his culinary focus at France and Germany. And his baked goods reflect that.
I like to bake and look at everything a little. Part is French, part is German. I take what I get. It is all very mixed up. Parts have a French idea and German baking traditions, or a German idea and French baking traditions. I like to mix it up a little.
There are soft French eclairs with tricolor icing in the French or German team colors. There are fruit tarts with foreign flags, and crisp German breads with the Euro Cup cooked into the crust. There are even French baguettes baked in the colors of the German flag, red, gold, and black. It reflects Gerbois' torn allegiance during the tournament.
From a soccer point of view, I think France will win. But then I'm not that certain because the German team is very motivated. But the French team has just now shown what is expected from them. I think after France scores the first goal, they will lock down their defense. But the game is open.
Whether France will meet with sweet victory in their first match will be decided on Tuesday when they face Germany in Munich. The game is taking place only a half hour away from Gerbois' bakery. The tournament includes teams representing 24 European nations.
I hope France will win, but Belgium has become a very good team recently. England is a bit of an outsider. Portugal, I don't know really. Maybe not this year. Of course, I am hoping it's France. Germany is also a favorite, but I'm cheering for France.
The tournament continues until July 11th. It features 51 matches across 11 countries. They are taking place from as far as Seville, Spain, in Western Europe, all the way to Baku, Azerbaijan, the country that straddles the border between Eastern Europe and Western Asia.
Well, that's a wrap. Tune into our evening show at 6:30 Eastern. Until next time, stay well. In New York City, I'm Kevin Hogan.
We have a new channel. Subscribe to us on YouTube at NTD News. Get the highlights of our news broadcast and the most important headlines that we curate especially for you.
Don't let YouTube decide what information you get. That's your choice. YouTube is deleting our videos and cuts you off from a source of honest reporting. Make sure you don't lose access to NTD's news content, and take a quick moment to subscribe to our newsletter so no matter what happens here, you'll keep your access to a trustworthy news source.